Get ready to rumble. Schilling Show Unleashed on the Seven Thunders Media Network. Former city councilor, husband, father, and community watchdog. Your host, Rob Schilling.
Welcome to the Schilling Show Unleashed Podcast. Remember, your direct support makes our show possible, and you can directly support this podcast by visiting shillingshow.com and then clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page to make a monthly contribution. We appreciate your support. The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast welcomes R.J. Hauman, the head of government relations and communications, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and today's topic, a proposed border security bill. It's beyond time. And R.J. Hauman, welcome back to the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for having me on.
I want to start here because I know you keep up with trends. And what's the latest from the southern border of the United States? The last time we talked, things were pretty dire.
Well, again, the Biden administration is always trying to keep the border numbers under wraps, unlike in the Trump administration. When the prior month was released, probably a week into the following month, the Biden administration holds it in their back pocket as long as possible. So we expect the official April numbers to be released probably tomorrow, a Friday, after 5 o'clock, so they miss the news cycle. However, since the Biden administration is involved in border security-related litigation, notably them trying to end Title 42, they actually have to notify the judge about the numbers down at the border. So it was kind of leaked. It was contained in a court document that Fox News uncovered where they did find out the April numbers. And it's 234,000 people were apprehended down at the border in the month of April. That is the highest number in DHS history. So you got to keep in mind, it might not be the highest number ever, but we never always collected the data like we currently do. But since DHS was formed, we haven't seen a month that high. And with Title 42, it's only getting rid of about 90,000 people that are apprehended. So most of the people who came in, most of that 230 or so thousand are people that are released then into the interior of the country and coming to American communities.
And you mentioned Title 42, and we've talked about it previously. What's the present status, and do we have any updates? Because there was some pushback developing.
Well, yeah, there is still a temporary injunction on the administration's ability to end it. Now, keep in mind, they even said it was going to stay in place until May 23rd, which I believe is Monday. I do expect, again, this is a Trump-appointed judge down in Louisiana, I believe, and this is, I think, about 18 states were suing. And I do think that he is going to prevent the Biden administration from ending it, doing a longer injunction for about a month or two. And I honestly think, congressional Democrats and the Biden administration are almost quietly hoping and praying that he does prevent them from ending Title 42. So they can look at their base, who's trying to get them to walk a political and policy plank, and say, sorry, guys, we tried. And then the border crisis numbers won't go as high as we expect. But again, even if Title 42 remains in place, even if it gets lifted, the border numbers are going to be sky high, and the American people are sure to reject the Biden administration at the polls in November.
They certainly are, and I'm hearing more and more about it every day. People are so frustrated. RJ, I want to talk about this flagship border security bill, the proposal. Who's behind this? Because I noticed there was quite a group of influential organizations and individuals.
Yeah, no, we were thrilled to work with big organizations like, obviously, the Heritage Foundation, the America First Policy Institute, other immigration groups like Numbers USA. We had a very big crew of people, pretty much every immigration policy maker in the Trump administration, Chad Wolf, DHS Secretary, Tom Hauman, ICE Director, Mark Morgan, CBP Commissioner, and even other people within the Trump administration, like his former Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, Russ Vought, who ran OMB, and his former ambassador to Mexico till the end of his term. So again, what we want Republicans to realize on Capitol Hill is, listen, if you guys take back one or both chambers, okay, the immigration issue is no longer messaging. Okay, it's one thing right now to be highlighting, we're being invaded. There is a border crisis going on. But we want them to realize that, hey, we want people to have a choice in November. Do you want the Biden border crisis, or do you want a party that actually has solutions to end the border crisis? Okay, this isn't just a messaging thing. So what we're urging them to do is have a flagship bill right in the 118th Congress within the first couple weeks, put on the floor to tell the American people and give the Biden administration a choice. Send something to his desk so the American people know that, listen, we gave him an opportunity to end the border crisis and he didn't. One other important thing here, Republicans cannot go down the path like some of their moderates want to do and just have a bill that's simply allocating resources. Okay. Now, border wall is great, and we think border wall funding should be a part of a package. Don't get me wrong, but that can't be the cornerstone. The Biden administration can reallocate that funding, and if you're giving them other things too, they could just use that to help process even more migrants quickly and efficiently. If you truly want to end the border crisis, you need to make statutory changes. You need to completely revamp our asylum system so people can't make frivolous claims and get released into the country. Our immigration debate, policy debate, et cetera, is a very weird point. You know, groups like FAIR have long called mandatory E-Verify, which would be able to weed out, employers who are hiring illegal aliens and prevent illegal aliens from working, turn off the jobs magnet. That was always the holy grail. But things have changed with all these illegal aliens being able to come in under the guise of legality. Some of them are able to obtain work permits as their frivolous asylum claim is taking years to be adjudicated. Now they're coming illegally. They want to get caught. They don't want to disappear into the country and quietly work under the table. They want to go through this process because they know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So everything's changed, and we just want to make sure, that Republicans are offering the correct solutions to actually end it, because the American people will take note. It's no longer just a messaging issue.
Yeah, RJ, before we get into specifics, and there's a number of really excellent proposals here, I do want to talk a bit about your point about messaging versus action, because we've seen a lot of people talking tough when they're in the minority. This happened with Obamacare, but on a lot of issues, and then the Republicans take control and they do nothing. How are we going to make sure that doesn't happen this time?
No, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's, again, one of the main things that happened under Trump. And I think under the Trump situation, it's a little bit different. Nobody expected him to win. So I don't think anybody in Capitol Hill was prepared to be working with a friendly administration and be able to accomplish legislative goals. But what's happening here for Republicans on Capitol Hill is this is almost a foregone conclusion. I mean, if you're looking at the internal Democratic polls, so near 10 points Republicans are up, on the generic ballot. So I think everybody knows it's going to be a bloodbath. So Republicans need to start preparing now so they can have shovel-ready reforms ready right out the gate. But again, this is just something that's why, again, groups like us, and we're trying to educate the public, to just grease the wheels now, allowing these, lawmakers on Capitol Hill, Republican leadership in both chambers, to really prepare so they are ready right when they take back Congress. And there's a couple other components, here too, is what we're saying as well is not only do you have to do a piece of flagship legislation, but I think we've recognized, so listen, even if that is able to get to Biden's desk, which I still don't think is possible, given the 60-vote threshold in the Senate, Biden's not going to sign it. He's not going to let his open borders puppeteers over there would never let him put pen to paper on something that would end the border crisis and stem the flow of illegal migration. They want that. So Republicans need to find other areas. They need to ramp up aggressive oversight. They'll have more oversight authority, being able to get records and data from these open borders people within DHS. Bring Mayorkas to Capitol Hill frequently. Make him answer for what he's done down at the border. We've seen them, they've created select committees. I think the border crisis would be worthy of one. You had one for Benghazi last time Republicans were in control. They're obviously having one for January 6th. Maybe the border could meet that criteria. And then lastly, I think the most important part is they really need to be aggressive with the purse strings, okay? They will be funding the federal government. They will be controlling those spending bills. The Biden administration cannot operate without the money that Republicans at Capitol Hill will be giving them. So you cannot just give them a blank check at any agency, I think. You have to attach some strings to the money and make sure it is spent as intended.
It's very true, and I hope there are people willing to hold them to that. I want to go to some of these recommendations, and I want to tell you up front, I'm very excited to see the concrete recommendations have been put forward by this group to say, hey, these are the things we need to do. I want to start with amnesty because we have a problem with this going back to the Reagan years, and I admired him greatly as a president, but one of his greatest mistakes, I guess, was to allow this flood to come in under the guise of we'll never do it again, and then this has happened over and over.
Yeah, no, that's one point we really wanted to make. And again, we have this fear, and I made this a little too in the weeds, but there was another proposal that Republicans put forward. Notably, it was Congressman Katko from New York, who's actually retiring. He's the current chair of the Homeland Security Committee, and he introduced a bill called the Border Security for America Act. Now, it didn't have an amnesty, but again, all it did was resource allocation, like I mentioned earlier. Our fear is if the Republican leadership was to get behind such a package, the Biden administration could call their bluff and just say, okay, we are willing to stomach this in exchange for some legalization. And I think Republicans may bite at that. Leadership would pivot back to their whole political miscalculation. Oh, we need to do this. We need to protect the dreamers, yada, yada, yada. We've heard it for so long. But the Biden administration could be desperate for political cover, and they could act like this Border Security for America Act, which is woefully inadequate, is a big sacrifice for them and lure kind of Republicans to the table. We just don't even want to get to that point. Okay, an amnesty would make the crisis 10 times worse. It would trigger an even greater flow. It cannot happen. Whatever goes to the president's desk or the other chamber, if it originates in the House, goes to the Senate. Again, it has to be a clean package with no amnesty in it, just border security reforms that will truly end the crisis.
There's another one here that I think would leave a lot of people scratching their heads, only because they probably thought we already had the authority to do this, but it's creating authority to immediately expel illegal aliens across the border. I think the situation we're in right now is totally untenable. You've described why, but this seems like a very basic first step.
Yeah, no, it is. And we got to get rid of some of the authority that the DHS secretary has to kind of make his own call. That we're not able to, immediately expel illegal aliens. We don't even have the resources to keep them detained for the time being. We just end up releasing them into the interior of the country to NGOs, and we never hear from them again. I mean, again, we have to put the control back in the hands of Congress, and not having a DHS secretary can choose, which laws he can enforce or which laws he doesn't want to enforce.
Let's talk about this disparate treatment of contiguous versus non-contiguous unaccompanied alien children. It doesn't really seem to make any sense at all. Where did that come from, and why do we have it?
The whole thing about, they're treated very differently, based on where they're from. I mean, if you're from a non-contiguous country, that obviously is a country that's not connected to the United States, you get treated entirely different. So if a Mexican child was to be smuggled across the border, they actually do get removed. But if you're from Central America, you get released into the country to a sponsor or something. So that's a magnetic pull factor for people sending their children up with human smugglers where there's rape and violence. And it's just terrible to have that. I mean, the other thing, too, and this underscores a whole flaw with the asylum system as well when it comes to countries that border the United States and countries that don't. Listen, if you're a true, I saw pictures on the news the other day of a lot of people that are still waiting in Mexico for Title 42. And again, these are so-called asylum seekers. They're already being trained up by immigration lawyers and NGOs of what to say, how to game the process to ensure that you're released into the country. And they're just chilling in Mexico, sleeping, just waiting and everything. Listen, if you're truly an asylum seeker and you're fleeing a country, the moment you get out of that country into another one, into Mexico, which is a country Americans vacation in, okay, you should want to stay there. You're now free. You're now away from what you're supposedly fleeing. But I think seeing that isn't the case and they just want to country shop and go to the next point, that just shows that they're economic migrants who are gaming the system.
I guess the other question on that would be, RJ, how do we even know what country anyone's from? I mean, if they come here and they have no idea and they're from Mexico, but they think they'll get better treatment for their kids if they say they're from Colombia, is that game going on?
Yeah, Rob. I mean, everybody, I haven't been down in a minute, but everybody I know who's been down to the border recently and everything. I mean, there's just piles and piles of identification documents. I mean, that's a thing that they're known to do. And again, you have these immigration lawyers. I mean, it's like an industry, an extremely lucrative industry, and all the charities down there that transport them up around the country, they tell them exactly what to do. And one of the things is to almost get rid of your materials, your papers, and any identification that you have. And then it's like impossible for asylum officers or immigration courts to be able to figure out who these people are and what their backgrounds are. I mean, again, that's why it's such a big public safety issue. We don't know who we're releasing into American communities. And even if we think we do, I mean, we still don't communicate as well as we should with a lot of these countries. You're seeing this uptick in migration from Haiti and Cuba. Haiti's got a very corrupt government. And then Cuba is obviously still kind of an enemy, a communist country that we don't have great relations with. So how do we know that they're providing us with the right information and these people don't have criminal records? We really don't.
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast with RJ Hauman of FAIR continues in a moment.
Associated Press award-winning journalist, Rob Schilling.
BorderHawk.news is a one-stop shop with the latest news about immigration nationalism and globalism. The BorderHawk staff daily curates immigration news stories and, in the fashion of the Drudge Report, updates the site with cutting-edge content and original first-class commentary. BorderHawk.news highlights national and international media reports, tweets, and nuggets buried in local news blurbs, polls, video clips, and policy research. BorderHawk is pro-legal immigration, pro-rule of law. but against an unsecure border, as countless Americans have suffered violence at the hands of criminal illegal aliens. And an increasing number of Americans are concerned about how mass migration affects their daily life. BorderHawk.news will remain on the forefront of the immigration issue with a buffet of info to read, evaluate, and share. Bookmark BorderHawk.news. Add them on social media at BorderHawkNews on Twitter.
Community-supported investigative journalism. Schilling Show Unleashed.
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast, we continue with R.J. Hauman, Head of Government Relations and Communications for FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, talking about a proposed border security bill and some of the excellent provisions within. You mentioned earlier the border wall, and I want to find out where we are on that. And I've been hearing rumors that there are just materials lying around and decomposing out in the desert somewhere. What's the status of the wall? Where do we stand now?
Yeah, we've seen, I saw some drone footage, I think, in the last 6 months, obviously, there's just acres and acres and acres of rusting border wall materials that have been sitting out. The Biden administration tried to cancel a lot of contracts and not use the money that was allocated by Congress specifically for it. That's something that was actually addressed in the omnibus spending bill, that $1.4 trillion package that probably triggered a decent little bit of inflation. But we don't really trust that the Biden administration is adequately spending that money. I don't think they're building new parts of the wall. They're just probably BSing and acting and repairing and enhancing current infrastructure. But again, the other thing to keep in mind is the wall is great. Sure, it's needed in some areas. But again, these people, they're not climbing the wall. They're just walking around to a port of entry or near a port of entry and just turning themselves in, sometimes even in front of the wall. And if there's a gate of sorts, they're let in so they can make their frivolous asylum claim and get released into the country. So a wall made sense before the Biden administration came in. The Trump administration tried to strengthen our asylum laws. They had remain in Mexico. It was a big part, of their border security strategy. And now they found a way around it. I mean, that kind of underscores the point of why we really need these statutory changes more than just throwing money or resources down there at the problem.
There are two organizations, there's the Border Patrol and obviously ICE. We've discussed them both, but they are separate and distinct in their missions, and they both have needs. So in the context of this bill, let's talk about each one, what they do and what they need.
The most important thing about CBP right now is, I always joke that, under the Biden administration, U.S. Customs and Border Protection is now U.S. Customs and Border Processing. So if you're the Biden administration, they even tried to act like, okay, well, we got an increase in money for the Border Patrol, and we actually allowed for, new hiring. But the new hiring was for processing people, okay, not actual Border Patrol officers that are down there seizing narcotics and stopping illegal immigration. So the money, or everything that gets provided, again, this is statutory changes along with new resources, needs to explicitly go to actually serve the agency's mission. Okay, they actually need more actual Border Patrol officers down there. Okay, and then they need obviously more space to be able to hold these people as their claims are quickly adjudicated, so we don't have to release them into the country. Now, again, on the ICE front, the agency's mission has been completely gutted under the Biden administration. I think in the last fiscal year, they maybe only deported about 90,000 people with millions upon millions of illegal aliens in this country. They know darn well, if I make this claim and I'm lying through my teeth, I won't show up in immigration court for maybe a year or two. And even if I'm ordered deported, I'm not going to be deported because of how their priorities are. They only say that the only people that are going to get deported are the ultimate criminals, the criminals of the criminals. Somebody obviously that committed a murder or, a rape or something. But if you're just a person who's here illegally and you haven't committed the crime, you will not be deported. And I even think if you're the person who's here illegally and you commit a lower level crime, even a lower tier felony, not just misdemeanors, I still don't think they'll be deported. So ICE's agency mission's gone. They need more resources in terms of, being able to deport more people and obviously hold more people in detention as they await their removal.
How about the Remain in Mexico policy? Is that even still in place? And if so, to what extent?
Well, the Biden administration was ordered to kind of restart it, even though they were trying to end it. But what they're doing is all for show, to pretend that they're complying with a court order. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have the freshest numbers in front of me, but I think they've only returned people to Mexico, maybe about 2,000 of them under Remain in Mexico. And that's dating back to, I believe, that December was when they were ordered to do it. Maybe I think it was November or December. So again, it's all for show. They're pretending to comply with the court. They know darn well that if they fully re-implemented the program, it would stop the flow, okay, and actually keep people on the other side of the border as their claims are adjudicated. They don't want that to happen. It's the most ridiculous thing when you know that there's a shovel-ready executive branch reform that you can use, and they just refuse to do so.
We've got problems with false claims, grounds for asylum, particularly gang violence and domestic violence. Anybody can make that up. What are we going to do about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the other thing. I mean, we just have to tighten up the eligibility. Those are claims, again, that you have to keep in mind, though, too, these asylum officers and some of these immigration judges, you're simply preaching to the choir. I mean, they know exactly what to say. And there's some of these people believe terms like that have broad applicability. I mean, that if you're coming from a country in Central America, you're automatically eligible because of the crime down there. I mean, that's just something, I think that's become almost the new normal. So we really have to tighten up that eligibility and, make sure that each case is looked at in great detail to make sure you're individually analyzing. You're not just allowing in blocks of people from a certain country. And one of the things the Biden administration is doing as well that we're just so opposed to, and it's going through the regulatory process. They're doing this very officially. So it's going to be tough to challenge in court. But they actually want asylum officers, who are the most open border, radical left-wing contingent, I think, within the federal government. They want to allow them to be able to rubber stamp migrants. Okay, they don't want them to have to go to an immigration court and ICE to actually be prosecuting the case to deport them. Okay, they want these asylum officers to be able to approve the claim right out the gate, rubber stamp them, and ensure they're released into the country. Now, what they're saying, their intentions are pure, which is a lie. They're saying we want to plow through the backlog much quicker. Okay, we don't want to send them into the country for 2 years. We want to quickly adjudicate their claim. Okay, that sounds all well and good, but look at the people who are adjudicating those claims. They're people with a rubber stamp in their hand. Wink, wink, want them to come into the country. So, again, the Biden administration, I'll have to give it to them. They're savvy, but we all know their true intent.
There's something here that really appears to me to be critically important, and that point is to reverse Arizona versus U.S. and give states independent authority to participate in enforcement of immigration laws. That was an atrocious decision, but it had great magnitude and really a chilling effect across the country. So this is something that can be done legislatively?
Yeah, no, it definitely could. I mean, to give these states the authority to enforce the law. We've been analyzing and talking to border states too about the authority that they can use. I mean, there's a big effort to declare an invasion, kind of test the federal government on, okay, you're not doing anything, so we're going to try our best to kind of stop this. But yeah, again, states are extremely limited right now. Texas has done all they can. I think sending Governor Abbott sending DPS down to the border served as a deterrent from here and there. But listen, when they were arresting illegal aliens and they held them, they could only hold them for so long. I think they were able to detain about 20, 30,000 of them. Every single one who was released, they notified DHS, but none of them were deported. They were just delaying the inevitable. And then, what Governor Abbott did as well of having buses transport, illegal aliens up here to Washington, that's almost doing them a service. You're allowing them to come to a predominantly Central American community in the suburbs of D.C., and I think there's more immigration lawyers per capita in our area than anywhere else. So I think you're almost doing them a favor. It's all for show. So if states are going to be able to act, we need to make sure that they can act in a way that actually will deter illegal immigration and enforce the law. It can't all be for political show, but again, we appreciate what some states have done and know their intent is to keep their citizens safe and the border secure.
RJ, I wanted to go to another topic here. Illegal aliens getting pallets of baby formula while Americans are facing rationing. This is something that's gotten the ire of people across the country. What documentation do we have of this actually taking place?
I'm not going to defend the Biden administration here and everything, but I understand though too. If you have these minors and these babies and stuff that are being taken here by their parents, they do have to be taken care of. That's something that's outside of their control. But it does show that the federal government's priorities are out of whack. I mean, obviously, American children should be treated the same. I mean, it should be just as much of a crisis if low-income people are unable to feed their children, or just regular people around the country are unable to feed their babies. But we still don't know the true details on this. It was a couple photos kind of went viral of a storage room and some pallets of baby formula being brought down by the federal government. But I mean, again, this is such a broader issue of the Biden administration's mismanagement of so many supply chains and radical policy decisions that have, a snowball effect in many areas. And I think, the one area, the people that I think are just exempt from anything that the rest of the Americans are suffering from are people that come here illegally because the red carpet gets rolled out.
There's one other thing I wanted to talk about, which was the previously deported illegal alien who's suing ICE now. This is Jose Guerra Castaneda. Tell us the story, please.
Who was deported, comes back, and then is suing ICE for that initial deportation. I mean, it's just, there's not much else to say. I mean, I feel like it's one of those other examples of every day you see something in the immigration space that makes your jaw drop. And it's like, listen, are these people even enforcing our laws? Do we even have a border? It's just, again, it's ridiculous. And it just shows, again, that these people, that they come to our country and everything, it's a lack of respect, I think, to some extent, too. But that's a lack of respect that we've triggered by not securing our borders and not enforcing our laws. We almost, I guess, sow this kind of attitude and this rejection of laws that are on the books and truly need to be enforced. Again, that's why we have to secure our borders so much. And it's got to be a top priority if Republicans take back the chamber in November.
RJ, how can we get more information on your work at FAIR or even support the efforts there?
Yeah, Rob, I encourage everybody to go to www.fairus.org. That's www.fairus.org. We got a ton of good daily content. You can figure out what's going on Capitol Hill and down at the border. Plenty of ways to donate and take action as well. Again, we're going to need everybody's help on contacting your lawmakers and just making your voice heard coming next year. And that's fairus.org.
RJ Hauman with Federation for American Immigration Reform. Thanks for your ongoing efforts, and thank you for joining us today on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
Of course, Rob.
That concludes another edition of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Visit us online at schillingshow.com, where you can directly support this podcast by clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page and making a monthly donation. Your support is essential for the continuation of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Until next time.